righty, welcome everyone, and thank you all for joining today's Bet on Entrepreneurship or BOE info session. Our agenda today is as follows. The info session will include 3 key chapters, if you will. First, we will kick things off with an overview of the BOE program and spend about 10 minutes talking about that. This will be followed by part 2, a BOE student alumni panel representing each of Penn's 4 undergraduate schools. The students will reflect on and share with you about their experiences in the BOE program, and we will spend most of our time with them. This will be followed by audience Q&A for about 10 minutes, after which the program will conclude. We're hosting this info session in collaboration with our colleagues at Penn First Plus, Wharton STEP, Advancing Women in Engineering, and of course, our BOE student alumni. So with that, let's get started. First, I would like to introduce you to my colleagues, Jill Anick, who is the Director of Venture Labs Investors and Explorer Programs, and Taylor Durham, Venture Labs Director of Marketing and Digital Design Studios. The BOE program will be managed by Jill and her team, and as mentioned earlier, we will have time for audience Q&A, which Taylor will be leading. So please submit your questions via the Zoom chat. Thank you, Jill and Taylor. So for those of you just meeting Venture Lab for the first time, Venture Lab is a resource for any Penn student who's interested in entrepreneurship and innovation. We serve all students across the university, undergraduate to graduate, all schools who aspire to be leaders in the startup ecosystem. Venture Lab is located in Tangen Hall, which is down at 40th and Sansom, just around the corner from the McDonald's, which is under construction right now. And our dedicated team is committed to helping our community of students who are interested in entrepreneurship and innovation maximize their ability to address important challenges through entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial thinking. So how do we do this? Well, our programs are aligned to pathways, whether it's founder, joiner, investor, navigator, and explorer, mirroring the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And each pathway features programs and resources specific to it. So today we will be talking about one of these programs, Bet on Entrepreneurship. So about BOE. Well, the Bet on Entrepreneurship program provides current first-year students, or quote, rising sophomores, that is the class of 2027 at Penn, who identify as first-generation or limited income, or FGLI, with a unique opportunity to gain experience in entrepreneurship at VC firms in the San Francisco Bay Area over the course of the summer. So key program details. We will be accepting a cohort of 14 students. Accepted students are required to complete the pre-immersion spring program, which is a boot camp. We'll review the program elements in subsequent slides. All required program elements, including dates, will be discussed here, and they'll also be noted in the application, so please review everything. You must be able to participate in all spring 2024 programming. You must be able to travel and live in San Francisco for the full duration of the summer and participate in all summer programming. All accepted students will receive a grant of $10,000 upon successful completion of the required program elements, and this grant will be dispersed in tranches. The cohort will participate in an 8-week summer immersive program with the host venture firms, and the duration of the summer program overall is 9 weeks. So here are some examples of the last summer's host firms here. There were 6 firms who hosted our 14 students, so they're noted here. And all of these firms were hosted by alumni within those companies. So here's an overview of the program timeline. So again, the application deadline is December 3rd, right before midnight. So the application deadline is before this date. Start early and budget plenty of time. The application requires different elements that you have to prepare. For example, there are 5 essays of up to 400 words. We are requesting information about your engagement in activities and clubs and your level of engagement. For example, a leadership role versus a membership role. There's an optional recommendation letter and a video upload. In addition to that, just hitting submit takes time, so don't wait till the last minute. There will be no extension, so please budget as much time as possible to prepare your information. This will be followed by a selection committee process, and the program cohort will receive invitations by the last week of January, i.e. those students that we've accepted, and that cohort will be finalized by February 2nd. This will be followed immediately by the spring boot camp, which will take place on Fridays from February 9th to February 9th through April 19th, Fridays in the afternoon from 3:30 to 6:30 p.m. We'll review that curriculum shortly. After that, the conclusion of the boot camp, summer assignments will be announced. The cohort will land in San Francisco on Tuesday, May 28th. That's right after Memorial Day. And that will be immediately followed by cohort orientation at the Wharton San Francisco campus, where the students will be housed. And then that will be followed by a program kickoff with all of the VC partner firms in attendance and the cohort also, and that will take place on the Wharton San Francisco campus. After that, the official summer immersion program starts the following Monday, where your work week will begin. And the summer immersion program will end at the end of July. On the 26th, we'll have a closing meeting again with the venture firm partners, during which the students will present their final presentations about the summer. So here is a little bit about the pre-immersion spring boot camp. It is 7 weeks of programming, and the objective is to set the cohort up for success. Ultimately, you will be we'll be reviewing information about Venture Capital 101, so the cohort will understand the language and vocabulary they will be hearing, understand the context for the projects that they'll be working on, really by fundamentals. These sessions will be led by professors and experts across the university, and participation is mandatory. So students must be able to attend all 7 sessions in order to access the program grant and to be part of the cohort. So here is an example of some of the program modules. We had alumni entrepreneurs come visit with us and speak to the students about their experiences. We had Professor Jeffrey Babin lead the VC 101 module, to discuss and set the foundation for all the students about venture capital industry, what it is from the perspective of the entrepreneur and also from the investor. We led a research boot camp, which Lippincott hosted for all of the students in creating resources for them, not only during the boot camp, but also throughout the summer. In addition, there will be career service modules and public speaking and other modules, including financial planning, for example. Once that takes place and boot camp is concluded, there's going to be a matching process that aligns what the VC firms need with the students' interests and skill sets. And we found that the pairings over the past summer, 2 summers, have been quite successful for all parties involved. So here again is an overview of the key summer immersion program details. So as far as dates, a kickoff event takes place when you arrive on campus at Wharton San Francisco the day after your arrival on Thursday and Friday in May, at the end of May. That will be followed by the 8-week summer immersion program, which runs from the full month of June and the full month of July. You will be showing up you're working with your VC firms for 5 days a week. In addition, you'll be meeting with the Venture Lab team. We'll have check-ins weekly to understand kind of where things are going, and if you need support from us. We also have check-ins with the venture firms, again, so we can course correct and address in real time anything that comes up along the way. In addition, although students are matched with their firms one-on-one, usually there's 2 students matched per firm, the whole cohort will meet together at each of the firms, because there'll be a teaching rotation hosted by the venture firms that host the whole entire cohort. And finally, there will be a closing event at the end of July. So here are the eligibility overview. Again, you must be, this program is open to current first-year Penn undergraduate students. So you are in the class of 2027. These are for students who identify as FGLI per Penn's guidelines. You're able to participate in all program elements, including the spring boot camp, which begins in February. It runs until April 19th. And you're able to travel and live in San Francisco for a full duration of the summer immersion program, i.e. you're landing at the end of May, and then you can stay and work through the end of July. Here are the application requirements. So there is a registration form where you submit your information, acknowledge the terms of agreement, which reviews the eligibility and some of the program elements we've just discussed. There's an application form. As I mentioned, there are essays that we request of the students, examples of activities and engagement here on campus. Your resume, a personal video, and an optional letter of recommendation for these 5 key components. So how do you apply? Well, in terms of process, you will have to go to the BOE website on the Venture Lab website. We'll drop the link in the chat today. You'll select the Bet on Entrepreneurship program. You'll see a list of programs that Venture Lab hosts, and you'll be applying to BOE, so look for that link. That'll prompt you to log into SurveyMonkey Apply with your PEN key. So if you don't already have a SurveyMonkey Apply account or SMA account, you'll need to create one. And then you'll be prompted to complete the tasks required. And when you're done, you hit submit. So now we're going to shift into the panel discussion with our esteemed BOE alumni. I'm going to introduce them here, and then I'll stop sharing the screen so you can meet with them, quote, in person. We have with us today Sitiano, who is part of the Healthcare Management Program, which is a joint degree program with the nursing school and Wharton. We have Amanda, who is a dual degree student with Wharton and the college, and she was part of cohort 1. We have Lavina joining us, who is a Wharton student, and she was just completed the BOE program this summer. We have Shakina, who's an engineering student, and she was part of cohort 1. And we have Khalida, who's an M&T student, which is the dual degree program with engineering in Wharton, and he just completed his experience this summer. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. All right, thank you everybody for joining us. All right, so we're going to get started. I think for a view, I think, Andrew, you're going to spotlight the panelists so everybody can see them in one screen. You can see that? Okay, great. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm going to start with kind of about your experience, which I think the students are really curious about. And if you could each take a turn in saying, sharing, what your experience with entrepreneurship and VC and startups in general did you have before the BOE program? And I'll start with my squares on the board. I'll start with Shakina, and then folks, the other panelists, you can jump in from there.
Hi, everyone. So I have a really short answer to this question. I had zero experience with entrepreneurship or business whatsoever before I got in. As a matter of fact, I didn't really entirely know what VC was. I don't know if you remember, Irina, but in my video for my application, I discussed that I only knew about VC because I loved romance novels. And in one of the romance novels, it was a venture capitalist that she had fallen in love with. And that's how I knew what VC was. But in terms of real world applicable experience, I had none before coming in. And so I learned everything through the boot camp and then during my time with SoftBank over the summer.
Thanks, Shakina. Amanda?
Yeah, I also have the same short answer. I had no idea what venture capital was. I actually came into Penn as a college major and ended up picking up my Wharton degree. Irina had mentioned I'm an uncoordinated dual degree student. Actually, after my experience in venture capital or over the summer, my only experience with quote unquote venture capital was Shark Tank. I used to watch it a lot growing up, and I wrote my application about Shark Tank and how I could see myself either pitching or being in the seat of an investor. And now I'm very involved with Venture Lab, and I still am involved with entrepreneurship and venture capital in some ways on campus. So I would say it's a very transformative experience.
Thanks, Amanda. Khalida, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd done like some nonprofit stuff, like trying to start a nonprofit in high school, but like I didn't have like super like formative experiences, and like VC especially. Like definitely learned mainly through the program. I came to campus, I didn't know what VC was anyway, so similar to everyone else.
Okay, how about you, Satiana?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. I had no idea what VC meant. I did join like entrepreneurship clubs freshman fall, so I got like that sense, but I didn't really have any idea what the VC ecosystem was about. So yeah.
And Lavina?
Yeah, so when I grew up, my mom actually owned a business. So growing up in the environment, that was kind of my first exposure to entrepreneurship. But in terms of like actual like venture capital, I didn't really know what that was until I came to Penn. I'm also from the Bay Area, so the startup space is like really booming. But I never really got to digest that until this past summer.
Great, thanks everybody. So I'm sure on the mind, on everybody's mind, or at least one of the things we had mentioned was that boot camp in the spring, which takes place every Friday starting February and in March in most of your cases, every from 3:30 to 6:30. So after class, you have another 3 hours of immersion in entrepreneurship, VC, and all the other modules. So how did you balance schoolwork and the boot camp? So I'll let you guys jump in whenever you want.
I actually thought it was a great introduction to what like venture capital is, but now as a junior, I'm taking 2 3-hour long classes on Mondays and Thursdays, and I genuinely believe that this introductory boot camp was a great start to that. I also think it's just a great building to be in. Like Venture Tangen Hall has so much lighting, so 3:30 to 6:30 kind of flies by. And also because it's in your second semester rather than starting now, you have a lot more time to adjust to current school and life and balance that out before you actually commit to this program. But I would say it's not as bad as people think it is.
Yeah, echoing that, I'd say it was like really manageable. If you're fully attentive during the boot camp, then you save yourself a lot of time throughout the week, because you don't really need to catch up as much. So I guess like recommend you to do that.
Yeah, I'd say similar to Amanda, it kind of felt like the time would just pass by. They typically divide our sessions into 2, and we'd have dinner in between. So you do like the first half, and then everyone would like sit together and talk and have dinner, and then the second half. I feel like it really wasn't that bad for me. I'd say just make sure your Friday quiz, if you're still taking any of the maths, or like earlier in the morning so you can get to class on time. But yeah, it's definitely not that bad. It flies by. And I think because it's on a Friday where most things, like most of your work for the week has been due, like you're done, it feels nice to just have that time with like your friends and to kind of make connections where you know you're going to get to spend the whole summer together later on. So yeah, it was a good experience for me overall.
Yeah, and just adding, I think it was really engaging at times. Like we had guest speakers come in, like startup founders, and like we just like got to be so exposed to the environment and learn so much, and also like hear from each firm. So I think like within that time, we were able to grasp like so much knowledge that you're able to like be prepared and like go into the summer like being fully prepared. So I think it was really helpful overall.
Yeah, I think the boot camp was I mean, I'm surprised that everyone's saying like amazing things. Like, I mean, it was long. It was, 3 hours is a long time, guys. Like, I understand that, but no, it's definitely fun. Like, if you come like actually like looking like ask questions to Jeffrey, looking to ask questions to the like people that the VCs are sending, you're gonna learn a lot. And honestly, like, I thought it was a good experience and definitely prepared us well for the summer.
What were some of the key things you learned either through the boot camp or the immersion as you reflect on it, because it's informed maybe your path going forward? So I guess to take a pause and kind of reflect on some of the key things you learned to share with the students who are curious about that. Can you impart some of that to folks here?
I can go ahead and get started. I think one of the main things I learned was the significance of being interdisciplinary. When I started the program, I was a little bit nervous that I was an engineering major. I studied bioengineering, to be specific. Going into this space, I felt like I wouldn't really have the skills that all of my other peers would have, and I'd kind of be behind. And when I was at SoftBank, we did a lot of coffee chats with different investors during the summer, and quite a few of them had engineering degrees. And I would always ask them, like, why did you study engineering? And if you did, how did you end up here? And do you think it's hindered your growth? Do you think it's like been like an edge that you have that others don't? And their answer was typically the latter, that they feel like it's helped them having a different background, having a different set of expertise. So I'm not sure if there are any engineers on the call right now, but I feel like if you are, don't be discouraged, right? Like, you're bringing something unique that other majors won't have. And this can be an edge for you if you leverage your skills properly in the workplace. So that's definitely something that I learned, and it's helped me as I've like continued on trying to get other internships and trying to figure out the best way to market myself to employers in the interview process.
Carlotta, what would you like to, what are some key things you learned either through the boot camp or through the immersion, would you say?
Yeah, I feel like through the boot camp, honestly, just like the first like 2 sessions at least, where Jeffrey just kind of like is pouring into like just like overall VC 101. Those are huge. And then towards the end, when we really started like breaking down, like, I mean, I'm saying like a cap table, that's something like you guys like probably like end up knowing what that is later. Like you do like we did this like interactive session where it's like we had to like be mock investors and like pick like which was like the best way to like finance this like deal. And like honestly, we didn't end up doing a lot of that in the immersion, but like I just thought it was really cool to be able to at least understand it and like be able to talk about that with the like other investors at the firm, even though they probably aren't going to put all that responsibility onto you. So definitely really good things to learn and that you probably wouldn't learn otherwise.
I personally, in all candidness, I think that this program really exposes every student who participates in it to like the general VC entrepreneurship space. Like obviously as a freshman, you're not going to be modeling or doing specific quantitative work while you're working in an immersion program, but the boot camp tries to kind of prepare you for a future that could potentially look like that. So like Lada said already, but Professor Babin did a really good job introducing us all to what venture capital looks like and what the ecosystem space looks like. And once you're like in San Francisco and you're working at a firm, you really get a good grasp of how everything functions, how venture capital firms are somewhat also kind of entrepreneurship like, and you get put on deals and have a great exposure to what everything looks like from a very like intern level. But I do think that it still gives you a really good understanding of the overall space, which I was really, really appreciative of.
Yeah, I think both the boot camp and the summer immersion, specifically the teach-ins, really helped me gauge how nuanced VC can be because like all the firms like invest in like different industries or like implement different diligence strategies, and like through BOE are really able to like kind of gauge that. I think also in retrospect, the immersion like was like my first ever real corporate job. So one of the biggest things I learned was professional work etiquette and kind of experiencing what work culture is like, at least in the VC industry. And I think it's a really great opportunity for you to get an idea of what being a full-fledged adult is like, in terms of balancing like commute, work, and also having time for yourself.
Yeah, and I would say like it helps to like understand how VC ties within your own passions and like intersection. Like I'm within nursing, like I think I came in like really interested in healthcare and I still am, but I didn't really know how like that tied within VC. And so working with like a healthcare investor and seeing how that plays a role, like I know a lot of people, like there's certain people that work with like AI and sustainability. So you're able to tie in like your passions into the space, which I think is really nice. And you're able to see like that intersection.
I'm sure folks are also thinking about, as you shared what you learned, they're imagining what it was like for you day to day in the summer. Could you share? I know it's captured, there's so many, and it maybe if there's a way to distill what that was like, personally, professionally, what was it like? And then to share like what firms you were at, because that may have informed that culture and that experience. So who'd like to start with what your day to day like was in the summer? I know it takes a minute to kind of, how do you distill all of that, right? Because it was a lot, but I saw a lot of growth across from everybody, from day one to, day 60, if you will. Tatiana, I'm gonna cold call in the Penn way.
I'll start. Okay, so usually we would wake up, I don't know, I'll use my example, but wake up around like 7, 8 and then head to work. We would usually like travel together. So I worked at First Round and there was 4 people. So like the 4 of us would go together, usually like through like the bus, or we would Uber together, and then we'd get to work, and then usually we would contact our like point of contact or the person that we were working under. So we would meet with that investor for a little bit and just like debrief on like what we would be working on throughout the day. Usually my summer consisted of like main projects. So I would just like work on those projects. And then if my like investor had like a pitch call, I would sit in on those calls. So I think it like varied throughout the day, but usually it would consist of just like working on a project. And then during lunch, like our office provided us lunch on some days. So we would like sit together with all the investors, and it was really nice because like you get to talk with everyone and like share how your day has been and just hear everyone's story. So I think that brought in like a good work culture. And then after work, I guess we would all like come back, and then sometimes we would, as a cohort, do something that day or that week. I know like we had different events, especially like with Irina, like we went to like baseball games and like did just fun activities together. So that was really nice to like rewind on the day. But yeah, I think it just varies, but hopefully that helps.
I also worked at First Round Capital, but I was in the first cohort. And luckily the office was a 7-minute walk from where I live. So it was a great work-life balance. It was very easy to get to work, come back. But me and the other students who worked at First on Capital, we still made it go to work at the same time and walk there together and then leave together. So I think just, which was very sweet because we all kind of got up together, got ready, and then kind of made our way to the office. It was kind of during the remote work era, so the office was mostly empty from like 1 to 2 days, but then when people came into work, it was always packed, and that was perfect timing. They had a lot of lunches and like even some after work events that they had invited the interns to for us to just meet all of the coworkers. I ended up coffee chatting everyone at my office, even the partners, which was really, really cool. But that would be from 9 to 5. I worked on an individual project as well, and we kind of rotated between projects and had a point of person, as Tatiana had mentioned. But after work, it was really fun because there was also Planet Fitness near our hotel or where we had stayed. So all of us, or a good majority of us, would go to Planet Fitness together. And there was like a free program for teenagers. And at that time, we were teenagers. So it was kind of like a really adulting experience where we would go to work, go to the gym, and there was no kitchen in our place, but we would get Trader Joe's food and all gather, and sometimes heat up some food. I think the living experience is different nowadays, but during the inaugural program, it was a very great balance of going to work, debriefing, going to the gym, eating food. But at night, we would explore and go on hikes on the weekends. San Francisco is beautiful. I'm from New York City originally, and that's a lot to say if I'm saying that San Francisco is beautiful, but I really enjoyed the experience, and I got really close with everyone that was in my cohort.
What about you, Lavina? What are some of the key things there's some day-to-day kind of where were you at and, personally and professionally?
Yeah, so I was working at Floodgate, which is actually in the Silicon Valley. And so we were living in SF. So my commute every day was pretty hefty. I'd probably wake up at like around 5:30 or 6 every morning. And then my co-intern and I would take the Caltrain over to Menlo Park, which was where we worked 9 to 5. Our day-to-day role typically involved writing investment memos to inform strategies for potential follow-on investments. But besides that, we also got an opportunity to engage with the reactors, which is Floodgate's accelerator program. So we got to meet a lot of people who were a part of that program. Floodgate was also like a really inviting environment. We got to work alongside all the associates, and we got dinner and like lunches with them. A lot of them went to Stanford, and they even invited Alvin, my co-intern, and I to have a picnic with them one time after work. So that was really sweet. And then after work, I commute back, typically get back around like 7 or so. And then we lived really close to Golden Gate Park. So I'd go running there like probably every day for about an hour or so. And then I'd come back home and then catch up with my roommate. And I feel like even though we do have pretty long work days, there's always still time to like hang out with the rest of the cohort. So we had a lot of like movie nights. We watched a lot of Black Mirror. And yeah, and then I'd say the weekends involve exploring the city. It's like really beautiful. I'm from there originally, but there's a lot of pockets of SF that I never even knew existed until this past summer.
What about you, Satiana? Did you already talk about it?
I did.
Okay.
I shared.
Okay. Halida, what about you?
Yeah, so this summer I was at Forerunner, and then we were staying in USF. Forerunners in this place called the Presidio. Probably, you'll hear about it maybe when you get there, but it was like a 15-20 minute bus ride. So me and my other intern, Olivia, we would wake up maybe like 7 something, and then like it was always this one like bus, like the 8:18 bus, what we were trying to get on, and then if we missed it, it was like, oh no, now we leave like 8:31 or whatever. But we got on the Muni, like it was kind of free, it kind of wasn't free, but it was kind of free. And that's that. And we would go to the office, try and get there like before 9 or like around 9. Same thing, like 9 to 5. I think the day-to-day was always like different. Like we were doing a lot of research this summer, but like we also had a lot of autonomy to just kind of like ask them, like, can we hop on a call with you? Can we, can you guys just teach us more about what you're like diving into, like, or like looking into like, what spaces they're going into? So it was definitely super interesting and like touch on a lot of like different points, because everyone is just doing something different. And that's also what you're going to learn when you're like at the firms. Like even though they're all like have the same role, like everyone's doing something like insanely different, just depending on whatever they're interested in. And then I think what was also like very, I don't know, like revealing, because again, like similar to like Lavina, like it's like my first like, you know, kind of corporate job. Like you really see the separation of like after like 5, like yeah, like the rest of the day is kind of like whatever you want to do. So like we'd come back, sometimes we're going like on a run in like Golden Gate Park, sometimes like we'd go thrifting, sometimes like we just, you know, there's just like kind of an infinite amount of things you could do. A lot of Black Mirror was watched, this is true, but like yeah, the ways to just kind of tap in with the cohort outside of work, and we were always like looking for fun things to do.
That's great. Can you also share, I mean, part of this program is get the entrepreneurial experience, so definitely from the lens and from the you know, role of the venture investor, which informs what, you know, what startups get to get invested in, and, you know, probably have a little bit more success because of that. Could you also share your experience and exposure from the entrepreneurship side, from the entrepreneur side of the house, and with startups? Some of the things that you worked on, some of the things, you know, that you learned or that were memorable?
I actually had a really amazing experience with the startup that I was paired with through First Round Capital. So I was working with First Round Capital and simultaneously also was paired with Claire, which is one of the startups they had invested in, and it's a low VOC paint startup. I've never bought paint in my life. I don't paint often, but it's for painting walls and furniture, and I ended up getting to meet everyone on the team virtually. But I was primarily doing a lot of customer personas and looking at their CRM software just to understand what touch points we can access customers through. And it was a very small team that I actually ended up meeting in New York City when they had a retreat. And after the summer had ended, we stayed in contact still while I was working with them through First Round Capital. And I think it was in September of the summer after the experience where we like went to New York together, and I met the startup founder and the CEO and everyone on the team that I had met virtually in person. And I was able to really get a good grasp of what it feels like to work in a startup, even though it was kind of virtually at first. I was able to meet them afterwards. But overall, the experience is very interesting to contrast against like First Round Capital. But it was really cool to see how, at least at my firm, it was a lot of investing in the people and the idea as well. But I was able to get a glimpse into what support a venture capital firm actually provides to, for example, one of the investments they make, but also understand the due diligence process that occurs before they make that investment.
Yeah, I also, sorry. I also worked at First Round, so it was very early stage, which meant that like we saw a lot of companies and like worked a lot with founders, especially like post investment. So there was like go to market teams and like community teams. So like that was really cool to see, because like obviously I was working with a certain investor, but also I was working with like, you know, that side. It was really interesting because like I've never been on like a pitch call before, obviously, and I like went into it thinking it was like Shark Tank, you know, like just judges just staring you down. But honestly, the pitch calls were really interesting because you really got to see like how a founder creates their idea and like all their strategies and like how they're talking with the investor and like the types of questions they're asking. And it was really cool to see that sense and like how like the investor is just like communicating with the founder. And I think in that sense, you get to see like their entrepreneurship journey. And I got to be on like so many pitch calls, and it's great to see like everybody's perspective and like their journeys in that. So I think that was really cool to see that entrepreneurship space and like what investors think of certain startups. So and their investment strategies. So I really like that part of it.
Lena,
Yes.
how about you?
Yeah. So I touched on this previously, but Floodgate had this incubator/accelerator program called Reactors, which had like a lot of like college students. So it was kind of like really eye-opening to see how there's people who are my age who are actually so committed to founding a startup. And I feel like especially at Penn, you're kind of sucked into the idea that, oh, like finance and consulting are like the only like, I guess, like appropriate career paths, especially for a student at Wharton. But I think this summer experience really exposed me to the fact that like not everyone wants to do that path. And I think I also realized that entrepreneurship is not a linear path itself either. Floodgate brought in Logan Green, who is like one of the co-founder of Lyfts, and like a lot of other co-founders like Steve Blank, and then the founder of Applied Intuition. And so hearing about their entrepreneurial journeys was also like really inspiring. And I think that was a really great way for me to be exposed to entrepreneurship outside of like investing.
What about Shakina, did you work with startups, and was your exposure with some of that side of the house?
Yeah, I definitely work with startups. So I was at SoftBank. I specifically worked with the Opportunity Fund within SoftBank. And one of the largest parts of my time over the summer was pitch calls with new founders. They had a really strong pipeline. So I was sitting in on probably like 5 to 8 pitch calls a week. Like not a day went by that I wasn't on at the very least one pitch call. And it was really interesting just getting to hear all the new ideas, getting to hear how passionate the founder was. And for a little bit of context about the Opportunity Fund, they specifically invest in Black, Latinx, and Native American founders. It was the fund was created after the death of George Floyd. George Floyd. So a lot of times we would sit in the calls and talk to the founders, and at the ending of the calls, they would express how much like inspiration they got from getting to sit in front of a VC. They would tell us about how they had reached out to like tens of VCs and they've been rejected, and they were just so inspired to see that there was a fund specifically for them. And it really just gave me like a reason to get up. Like it made me want to work harder to like make sure I did what I needed to do to make sure that they could get a successful result at the ending of their time with SoftBank. So that was it really just showed me the compassionate side of finance and how finance can do good and change so many people's lives. So that was really inspirational for me being on the other end of it.
What about you, Khalid? As you know, folks have mentioned, each of those firms invest in different life stage and different sectors. And at Forerunner, it's e-commerce specific. What kind of exposure from an entrepreneurship experience and founder did you experience while you were there?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, as like Arena was saying, Forerunner is like mainly investing in consumer, so more like public facing companies. I think like we basically like again, as I was saying, we did a lot of research. Like so on our first project, which was really interesting, like a way that we were kind of able to leverage all the companies was like, if there's something that just happens to come up that like maybe there's a random company that like is doing that. So I was like looking into a lot of like education stuff, and like they invested in like a bunch of like like different like tutoring companies or like ed tech companies. So like I was able to like talk to a lot of like the CEOs of those startups, and like they would tell me about like one like their adventure and like their journey through entrepreneurship, but then also like now what's specifically happening that's like changing random different models or like how they're actually operating, because coming out of COVID especially, like so many of them had to pivot. But then also we had a portfolio support project. So my company that I was working with was a parenting company. So like obviously like I had no idea what was going on. But just having to like look into like all the different the considerations that like the CEO, his name is Alan, had to make. And even then, like being so early stage, like he actually came to Forerunner with just an idea. Like he didn't have a product yet, but they just thought he was like a really like good founder for like what he was trying to like build for. And then he had a really interesting like way to kind of go to market. So they just backed him with literally no idea. So I was kind of helping to even like be like, okay, here are some things that you should prioritize like for your product. This is me, like again, just being like a college student who doesn't really like have much experience. So definitely it was again like just such an interesting thing to be able to kind of work with. Again, just kind of showing how there's such different sides of things that you can do in VC.
As you guys all mentioned, like maybe it's at Penn specifically, but career path and thinking ahead is always on one's mind. Can you share with folks how has this experience informed your life, and how has it informed the choices that you've explored after BOE? How has that influenced you, and have you thought about that pathway and then your life in general? Amanda, I see you nodding, so I'm going to turn to you first.
Yeah, I can kick it off. I think quite blankly, but on entrepreneurship changed my trajectory of my life. I think having the experience to go to San Francisco, and as we had all kind of recounted, live somewhat of an adult experience, but still understand what it means to have this work-life balance, changed how I viewed my career and what I wanted to do in the future. I came into Penn, again, as I said, in the college. I had no idea what I wanted to do, let alone do finance. but I ended up actually applying to another investment program called Grow to Invest that I ended up doing my sophomore summer because I wanted to continue learning and building on those fundamental skills that I had developed during Bent Entrepreneurship. I also knew that through the experience, I wanted to continue working in venture capital in the long run, but I needed to build those core skills before I actually jumped into the industry. And I think that's something that you end up kind of gathering throughout your experience at whatever firm you end up choosing or end up being paired at. But through a lot of coffee chats, I realized that maybe I'm more on the investing route rather than the entrepreneurship route. And a lot of my peers differed where they decided they wanted to do more entrepreneurship. But after understanding that about myself and what I wanted to do, I kind of set out like a timeline where maybe in 2 years after grad, I would venture into the venture capital space or do something more so consumer retail, because I also realized that I like that space while being paired with Claire, the paint startup that I had mentioned before. So it helped me kind of determine where I want to be in 2 to 3 years after grad. But I did the Grow to Invest program during my sophomore summer, which followed the Bent Entrepreneurship program, which I also loved and would love to speak to. If anyone's interested, can also email me afterwards. And this summer, I'll be going to BlackRock and I'll be working on the capital markets team with the equity private markets division because I want to work in the private sector rather than the public sector. But the initial experience that I had in San Francisco really informed my experience and preferences on where I want to end up in 2 to 3 years, which guided me in choosing which programs I wanted to do and what I applied for when I was actually recruiting. And I'll probably be returning to BlackRock full-time for 2 years and then pivoting towards the VC and retail space post that experience.
Okay. What about you, Shakina?
Yeah, I can definitely relate to what Amanda said. I think this program helped me in 2 ways. The first is the most obvious, that it just looked good on my resume to say that I did this program at Penn and at SoftBank. Like every time I'm in an interview, they're always so shocked to hear that I had that opportunity as a freshman because it's something that's practically unheard of. And when I explain the whole program to them, they're always so amazed, and they always just tell me how like blessed I am that I had the chance to do that as a freshman. And I 100% agree. So right off the bat, like it just looks good, right? And then secondly, I feel like while I was there over the summer, I had the opportunity to coffee chat with a lot of different investors. And from those conversations, I got to better understand like what it was that I enjoyed at SoftBank, what I didn't like so much, and then putting those together and seeing like what else is there that'll like meet my needs specifically, right? And from those conversations, I started to learn about other divisions of finance that I've never heard of, like asset management, which is what I pursued the next summer. So after SoftBank, I moved on to Fidelity, and I was a discovery intern there last summer, and I'll be returning there this summer as a direct lending intern in their private credit division. And I think that a lot of my conversations in SoftBank, the fact that I got to be honest and say, hey, like I really like, you know, getting to meet with founders, but I don't like the fact that we're a little bit hands off post investment, and just being honest and telling them like every little bit of the things that I love and the things that I don't love, it really helped me just create an idea that helped me figure out exactly what I wanted to do for my recruiting for the next summer. And that's something that I struggled with a lot before BOE, where I was like, okay, you know, I'm interested in finance, but like, what does it mean to be interested in finance? Like there's 100 different routes you can take. So I think just having those different experiences and then helping you narrow down what you're most interested in, that helped me a lot in my recruiting journey for the next summer.
Lavina?
Yeah, I'd say for me, working at Floodgate really allowed me to pinpoint what industry I'm interested in. So my firm particularly invested in technology companies, and I think technology is really cool. But what I've realized is that I prefer something that's more tangible. And so from there, kind of made the realization that I'm more interested in the consumer space. So I'm going to be carrying that knowledge with me, moving on, and like whatever recruiting takes place in the future. Agreeing with Amanda, I also think that VC is really cool, but I don't think it's something that I would exactly partake in until I develop like the core foundational skills first. For this summer, I'm still recruiting for that, but I did apply to Girls Who Invest too, so hopefully that can work out. And I'd say After spending the whole summer on early stage companies, I'm really interested in exploring more mature companies. So PE is or private equity is something that's definitely of interest to me.
Yeah. I guess like as someone who's currently going through the recruiting cycle, like I don't really have the the ending prospects that the cohort one is talking about, but it definitely has informed how I'm thinking about going forward. I feel like it takes away a lot of the stress, especially just because you just become, I don't know, maybe become less risk averse, for lack of a better word, because you just kind of get to see a lot of the entrepreneurs. I mean, I remember in one of the teach-ins with, was it with Floodgate, Luna? Or no, it was with Emmeline. It was with Emmeline. And they brought in this one of their founders called for a company called Skipify. And he was just kind of like going in about like, like it's all in, like, there's no point doing the track lifestyle, blah, blah, blah. And he was just saying like how it's just really okay to kind of like let go and just like, even if you jump in for like 1 year, 2 years, and just really try and like do something that you're fully invested in, as opposed to just like kind of working for someone else. And like, if it works out, then it works out. And if it doesn't, at least you tried. So definitely like not as stressed out about like, oh my gosh, this consulting job, this finance job, and entrepreneurship seems like a very enticing pathway. I'd say like right now, like I applied like some of those like VC fellowships. Like there's something called like Rough Draft Ventures, if anyone knows about that I'm working on. So still kind of wanting to stay within the ecosystem a little bit. But yeah, definitely opened my eyes to like being open to doing other things outside of like the traditional Wharton pathways.
Yeah, and I would say for me, obviously like I came in like not knowing what VC was at all. And I guess like mainly came in like really interested in like healthcare and that intersection of like business and finance. And then like obviously I went through the program and like learned so much about like VC and like had so much exposure that I realized that I really like that space and I really like investing. But I think too, like talking with so many people, there's so many routes to get to that point. Like I was talking to people at the firm who were founders themselves and like people who worked in consulting, people who worked in IB. There's like so many different pathways to get into VC, but I think it's like important to have those skills before jumping into it. I think a lot of the investors have a lot of background knowledge on different industries and like have a lot of technical skills too. So I wanted to just get that, I guess, a little bit. So like next summer, like I'll be in IB. So I think like getting that background first is gonna just like, I guess, guide me. But definitely want to long-term go into VC. I think that it's just an amazing space and I had an amazing time. And I really like early stage as well. So just figuring out like what you like, whether that be like growth stage, early stage, and just figuring out that passion. I think too, like in my interviews, I cannot emphasize how amazing it is to be a freshman working at a VC firm. Like that sets you apart, let alone. So yeah.
That's awesome. So before we turn to audience Q&A, what is a key piece of advice you'd share with your applicants in general? One key thing.
I think I emphasize this in every single, whenever people ask me what they should write about, or even like Girls Who Invest applications, kind of college applications, it kind of applies here as well. But acknowledging your experience in your past and being very open and vulnerable is an advice that I give everyone. I think just knowing the audience of who is applying and what applications they've seen, it's a lot of first and low income students, and everyone has such a unique background here. And I'm sure everyone in the audience also has such a unique background, where it's really, really important to highlight the struggles and also the successes that you've had throughout your life. Just to get to Penn, I think, is a huge achievement. And I'm not personally reading the applications, but I'm sure the ones reading the applications would be more than grateful to be able to read about what brought you to Penn and also what brings you to apply to BOE.
I'd say my advice is a little bit similar to Amanda's, and it would just be to just keep an open mind and try to think about everything in the most positive light possible. For example, for me, my year, I was at SoftBank, like I said, and the office was in Palo Alto, which is about like an hour, maybe more than an hour, like an hour and a half from the hotel that we were staying at. And I did not like a long commute. Honestly, to this day, I still don't like a long commute. I always try to to live close to my workplace because I love walking to work. But when I look back on it, I bonded so much with my coworkers. I had two of them during those long commutes. Like we'd sit together, we'd gossip, we'd like talk about like TikToks. It just like was a really good bonding exercise for us, having those long commutes. And then because of that, one of our bosses heard about the long commute and he decided to like drive us to work a few days out of the week. He had this really cool Tesla, and it was just a good experience, you know. And I can think about so many other things during the summer where, you know, maybe there'd be 3 projects and I'd get the one that I was least interested in, but then I ended up loving it, right? So just keep an open mind. Things may not go your way. Even if you don't end up getting into the program, right? There's a reason behind it. Keep an open mind, try to stay positive, and just try to make the best out of whatever scenario you're in. I feel like that advice will take you a very long way in life.
Lavina?
Yeah, so for the written application, I'd say make sure to express like why BOE is great for you, what you can offer to BOE, and also express like what your goals are for like the future and how BOE can help you really attain that. I think that's like really valuable for people who are reviewing your application. And in terms of the summer immersion experience, I'd say things are not going to be easy all the time. So take these challenges as like a learning experience, and also be aware that there's always like Irina and like the BOE directors who are always there to be your support system and also your cohort. So it's, although BOE is a great opportunity for you to really become independent, there's always people around you to support you. So I think always be aware of that.
Thank you. Satiana?
Yeah, I would say within the application, I think like it's fair to say that none of us worked at a VC firm before, so it's perfectly fine that you haven't. But I think it's like what sets you apart is just like your story and like your interest to be in like that space, and like having like prior, I don't know, experience. Like I think in high school, like I worked with a leadership nonprofit and we started a lot of different things, and I think like being able to be really like to tell your own story, I guess, in your way. So like whether you've crafted something or built something, I think like highlighting that, but also like expressing interest in wanting to work in like a VC space and like doing your homework and doing your own a little bit of research. I think that really helps. But I think too, it's just like sharing your own story and like showing your passion and like really excitement in it too. I think highlighting that.
Kalada?
Yeah, I mean, they've already said great things, so I'll just like keep it short, but definitely like remember like we don't have all the answers. I feel like even like VC is just so nebulous in itself that like they don't even really have the answers. So just remember, like, honestly, just kind of jump into that curiosity of like why you think it's interesting. Like just having that is definitely just huge. As long as you can really show that like you care about these things. You may not have had those experiences yet, but like there are things in your life that have guided you to believe that like you do want to have that experience. And kind of just being able to like paint a story around that. That's probably the biggest advice.
Thanks, everybody. We're going to spend a few minutes on audience Q&A. So some questions have come through the chat, which I'll be sharing with you all. One question was, you know, how has lacking a safety net being a FGLI student affected your relationship with entrepreneurship? And then, you know, because the program is, you know, entrepreneurship broadly, VC side, and you shared your experience on the entrepreneurship side of the house. Have any of your BOE peers become entrepreneurs or continue that path? So 2-part, how is lacking a safety net being FGLI affected your relationship with entrepreneurship? And then what about BOE peers becoming entrepreneurs out of the program? Amanda, did you want to start?
Yeah, I can take on that question. It's a really good question, by the way. I think I've always thought about my experiences being first and low income and identity and how it has affected where I've ended up. And I do acknowledge that I am more risk averse because of this fact that I don't have a safety net. Like I worked at a financial firm, I'm working in another financial firm, and it offers a lot of security. And I've spoken a lot to a lot of my peers who are actually doing entrepreneurship about the differences in our background and what has led up to potentially pursuing entrepreneurship versus not. Off the top of my head, I don't know anyone in cohort 1 that is actually doing a startup currently, but I do know that a lot of us have interest within that space. It's just a little bit difficult to do so while you're at college. And I failed to mention this earlier, but I do plan on hopefully working at a startup after grad as well. I think that's a valuable experience that I want to have even after 2 years of working at for example, like at BlackRock, for example. But I do think that I acknowledge that being first and low income makes it a lot more difficult to enter into an entrepreneurship space because it is very risky. Even at Penn, I've been able to see that a lot of the students who are working on startups currently have that financial safety of their parents, or just are not as worried about attaining like a really high income job after college because they have that soft net to fall back on if everything fails. But I do not think that is something preventing me from pursuing entrepreneurship. I also do want to acknowledge that wanting to work in entrepreneurship or being entrepreneurial is also very innate. But this program is made to expose you to it in the case that you have that inkling to pursue a startup. And I think Kalada also spoke briefly about how he wants to continue working in this space as well. So I would love to hear your response. But I don't think that I think that an entrepreneurship has actually made me more prone to working in the entrepreneurship space than before.
Thanks, Amanda. Let's toss it to Kalada, because Amanda, you had to kind of nodded, you picked up on that note that Kalada had shared about, maybe what his thinking about, entrepreneurship might be. But Kalada, can you share like how is lacking a safety net being figuratively affected your relationship with entrepreneurship and peers in their cohort, whether they've pursued entrepreneurship pathway?
Yeah, I remember like this was actually like the big topic of discussion, at least like our last like meeting or whatever in Wharton SF. I feel like it's just super real, like 100%, like that not having that safety net just 100% does make it harder to at least make your own, or just fully commit to like doing your own startup. Well, I do say that BOE has made it like a lot, at least not easier, but it just opens your eyes to at least wanting to work for a startup, or like something that maybe is not like it's like such an established industry. Like I think like this summer I will like go to work for a startup doing like tech or something. But and I think that BOE has kind of like allowed me to think that that's like a fun decision, even if it's like not the same big cushy job that everyone else is doing for the summer. And in terms of people doing entrepreneurship from the cohort, I remember I mean Chubi was working the entire summer on his startup. I don't know if they ended up launching yet, but I know that he was like had been super involved in that. And then technically like not a startup, but Juan, who's my roommate for the summer, he is like making, or I guess they've already made it, but like there's like a student VC, so like it's run by students, but also they only invest in students. So like that also there's cool things like that where it's not necessarily like you're making a company, but you're still starting something new. And I think BOE again also like emboldened him to do that. So definitely different pathways that are coming out of the program.
So Tiana, were you leaning in?
Yeah, I was gonna add to like I think BOE and like working at a VC firm and like the people you meet is like great as like connection network wise. Like I know Calder mentioned like Chubi, for example, like I think like he took advantage of that and like really like talk to everyone at the firm. I think like if you want to like start a startup or like be in that space later on, like personally, like I think like it'll be great to work at a startup once in my life. Like I think the experiences and exposure you get is like unlike any other. So just like the networking you have, like I know someone at first round, I think it was in cohort 1, I think it's Oliver, like or someone in the cohort 1 like worked at a startup from like I think it was Forerunner, but Forerunner's portfolio company, like he worked at their portfolio company. So I think like you get to just be so exposed to so many different companies, and you can like go back and like ask your firm like if that was a good fit for you, and like work maybe at their portfolio companies or work at a different startups. So I think like the connections you make in the network is incredible if you're interested in that space.
Shakina, did you want to share some parting wisdom? And then Levine after that.
Honestly, Satiana took the words right out of my mouth. I was just going to mention how valuable it can be if you know you want to go into entrepreneurship, that this program where you're meeting so many different investors from so many different funds that have different investment techniques, just gaining their insights and seeing, when they hear a pitch call, what are the thoughts that they're having? Like, what's their thought process to decide if they're going to invest or not? So that when you're on the other end and you're ready to have investors for your startup or whatnot, you know what their thoughts could be. So just reiterating what she said, I feel like it think this program can still be very beneficial for you if you know that you want to go into entrepreneurship, just because you're getting the other side's point of view.
Great. And
Even if you don't want to be an entrepreneur, the people at your firm also have experiences outside of VC. Like I know a lot of people at my firm were like software engineers or like consultants before that. And so beyond like the network of like venture capitalists, you also have their previous experiences to rely on if in case you're interested in exploring like other career paths. And so I think that's something to also keep in mind.
okay, great, everybody. I think we're at time for questions. So just to wrap things up, everybody, I'm going to share this real quick. So as a reminder, the application deadline, submit before December 3rd. If you have questions, you may email us here at this email address with BOE application in the subject line. As we mentioned, we'll be hosting community hours with BOE student alumni, so there'll be a resource for you for your questions. And I just wanted to thank our amazing panel, our BOE student alumni panel, for joining us and taking time out of their day to share with you about their experience. And of course, my Venture Lab colleagues, Jill Anik and Taylor Durham, and also our partners at Penn First Plus, Wharton Step, Advancing Women in Engineering. So thanks, everybody. And Sitiana, Amanda, Shakina, Lavina, and Khaled, it was so great to see you guys. I look forward to talking to you guys soon. And everybody have a great day. And we look forward to seeing your applications.